In 2010, within the span of 36 minutes, $1 trillion of U.S. stock market value evaporated, in part because of high-speed trading in which pre-programmed algorithms manipulate the ways in which millions of shares of stock are traded in milliseconds. What are big data? Let me say a few bits about bytes. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the term data refers to an item of information, or datum, and in plural, data, or a set of data. These terms originate largely unchanged from classical Latin. As a mass noun, the definition of data refers to related items, chiefly numerical information considered collectively, typically obtained by scientific work and used for reference, analysis, or calculation. In keeping with its formal usage, I will refer to data in the plural. A related concept to data that is becoming increasingly relevant to social behavior is the meme. Richard Dawkins, the noted evolutionary biologist, originated the concept of meme. He speculated that just as genes transmit biological information from one organism to another, there was likely to be an analogous mechanism in the transfer of cultural information from one individual to another. He proposed the term meme to represent this concept. A meme is an act, message, or meaning structure that is capable of replication, which means imitation or reproduction. Memes, like genes, are likely to thrive to the extent that they reveal longevity, fecundity, and copying fidelity. Common memes are popular YouTube videos such as Charlie Bit My Finger or Gangnam Style, and famous paintings with new thought bubbles or expressions inserted. But memes are much more than just popular culture images or humorous quips. Memes are any replicable communication message capable of spreading meaning from one person to another. As such, all social media and social network service technologies, email, and most digital communications represent ways in which memes are diffused from person to person. Longevity refers to the endurance of a given idea or message. You may have a song that says in your own head, but this tells us little about how long that tune will last in society in general. Fecundity refers to how widely a meme spreads throughout culture. Some ideas, images, songs, YouTube videos, tweets, and so forth go nowhere, whereas others become iconic and pass through the senses of hundreds of millions of people. Finally, the copying fidelity of memes refers to how accurately an idea or message can be replicated over and over. When Dawkins first speculated on the idea of memes in 1976, he considered himself on shaky ground in regard to this element. Little did he realize how digital technologies in general, and smartphones and integrated media in particular, would revolutionize the ability to instantly replicate memes with extreme fidelity. From the perspective of memes, almost anyone on the planet is now capable of generating big data. The vast majority of memes go nowhere. The average tweet or email goes to one or two people, and the average YouTube gets viewed by family members. But some emails go to entire multinational company workforces. Some tweets are publicized to millions, and some YouTube videos are seen by hundreds of millions. In a global sense, we have never before had so much capability to communicate globally. If data are relatively easy to define, the qualifier big presents a far more interesting problem in definition. What is big to one person may not be big to another. And what is big may depend upon the potential size of the universe or population of data. In traditional research, a survey of 10,000 individuals would generally be considered a large-scale survey. But considered in the context of a world population of around 7.5 billion people, 10,000 is a small fraction of the potential information available. Several characteristics have been suggested to help provide guidance on what qualifies as big data. Big data are information that share the following features: volume, velocity, variety, and variability. Whereas these are defining features, some of the functions of big data include veracity, visualization, and value. Each of these features deserves some clarification. Volume refers to size, quantity, or amount of information. There are several ways of quantifying volume. The computer code approach involves bits and bytes. A bit is a single binary digit comprised of a 1 or a 0. Every symbol in a language has an 8-digit binary code of 1s and 0s, which comprises a byte. A kilobyte is 1,024 bytes. A megabyte is 1,024 kilobytes, and so on up the ladder of gigabytes, terabytes, exabytes, zettabytes, yottabytes, xenobytes, and so on. By one estimate, in 2007, the world was capable of storing 2.9 times 10 to the 20th power bytes, and to carry out 6.4 times 10 to the 15th power instructions on computers. And bidirectional communications and globally stored information was growing at over 25% per year. Another important aspect of volume is who is producing the volume. The big data universe is digitally divided in several ways, and one of these ways is who generates most big data. Although there is some economic digital divide, for people to have access to media such as Twitter, even within the Twitterverse, there is massive disparity in who gets their messages out. For example, globally, 2 to 20% of people generate up to 98% of social media content. The human appetite for information and communication is being outpaced by our capacity for creating and storing such information. According to the most recent estimate up to 2007, humankind had the capacity to store a mind-boggling 2.9 times 10 to the 20th power bytes and communicate approximately 2 times 10 to the 21st power bytes. This capacity was enabled by a growth of general-purpose computing of 58% per year and an increase of bidirectional telecommunications devices of 28% per year, compared to a modest 6% annual growth in broadcasting channels. This massive increase in information capacity and communicability of information has been greatly facilitated by the development of the World Wide Web and the Internet. Approximately 40% of the world's population had access to the internet in 2016, growing approximately tenfold over the period 2000 to 2015. Almost 2/3 of the world population has access to a mobile phone, and about 1/3 has access to a smartphone. Indeed, by one estimate, 90% of all information ever created was created in the last couple of years. From 2005 to 2020, it is predicted that the digital universe will expand 300-fold, from 130 exabytes to 40,000 exabytes, or 40,000 exabytes doubling every 2 years. By January of 2016, there were over 300 million tweets per day. Having such volumes of data is of little use if it is not accessible. Velocity refers to the speed with which information can be stored, processed, analyzed, and transmitted. Speeds, like increases in volume, are expected to double by 2020. Variety refers to the degree to which the data are structured according to a preconceived set of informational categories and functions or uses. For example, underneath the text of most tweets are metadata about the geographic location and city in which the tweet originated, the time the tweet was generated, and the number of friends and followers of the tweet author. But the actual texts of the tweets are relatively unstructured. As communicative messages, analysis requires new structures such as coding systems or software programs to extract meaningful categories from the tweets. Variability is about the evolving nature of the meaning of big data. The kinds of data that are useful at one time or in one context may become archaic when newer or different forms of data become available. Language and texts themselves evolve. The words used to evaluate political candidates in one election cycle may be radically different from the kinds of data that indicate sentiment for the candidates in a subsequent election. If big data are characterized by their volume, velocity, variety, and variability, their utility can often be evaluated by their veracity, visualization, and value. A concept increasingly associated with big data is social network. A social network is comprised of a group of people, or nodes, who are connected through some form of communication exchange. Whenever one person sends a message to another person, whether through Twitter, email, Instagram, or any medium, it represents a link between them. This link can be considered reciprocal or non-reciprocal. So, a celebrity may be followed by many people who the celebrity can send messages to, but those people may not be followed by the celebrity, so they cannot send messages directly to that celebrity. Given any social network, there are many different factors that help examine the spread of information. As information spreads through a social network, it can be understood as a type of information diffusion. Sometimes, information spreads rapidly through a social network or population of people, representing many different overlapping social networks. Other times, a given message or information fails to spread to many people in this network, or takes a long time to spread. As information spreads from any one node to another node through a link, the receiving node decides whether or not to view, read, click through, delete, and so forth. Thus, in each communication in a social network, each message can be viewed as a type of innovation, which is an idea, practice, or object that is perceived as new by an individual or other unit of adoption. The decision to accept the message in some way, such as to laugh at a meme or to send the message to others in one social network, is a decision whether or not to adopt the innovation. This process of information diffusion is a map of the influence of any given message. The more it is adopted across nodes and social networks in a population, and the faster it is adopted, the more influential the message is. It turns out that there are basic patterns to how the diffusion of innovations occur. Ordinarily, when an idea or message is new, it is generated by a small number of people called innovators. This could be anything that could be communicated in a message, such as a phrase or a video or a product. If that innovation has value for others, some people latch onto it. These are called early adopters. Some innovations die quickly and are never adopted sufficiently for the idea to go viral. But when some of the innovators and early adopters are opinion leaders, then often there is a broad group called the early majority of the population that then adopts this idea or message. When this group has adopted or processed the message, approximately half of the potential target population will have seen or adopted the message. Some ideas continue to penetrate the remaining potential market, and the next large group to adopt is the late majority. Furthermore, there are usually some people in a population who are late to the game and simply take a longer time to get exposed to an idea. These are the laggards of the population. When this pattern of innovation adoption is graphed over time, it tends to reveal what is referred to as the S-curve of adoption, in which an idea starts out in a small percentage of the target population, grows at an accelerated pace through the middle majorities of the population, and then tapers off as there are fewer and fewer people who may be exposed to this innovation. For example, when a new clothing style or smartphone innovation comes out, the early adopters represent the bold people who jumpstart the innovation. As potential opinion leaders display and communicate these adoptions, others begin to adopt, and the innovation becomes more and more commonplace in its potential market. But there are always some people who are simply slow to adopt and wait until it feels safe or necessary to adopt. By the time laggards adopt a given innovation, the original innovators may have already moved on to new innovations. There are several ways of monitoring and influencing such adoption processes that involve big data. First, there are certain factors that facilitate innovation diffusion in regard to people's knowledge, including trialability, group norms, homophily, communicability, and relative advantage. Trialability refers to how easy it is for a potential adopter to make use of an innovation. Cars sell to some extent based on potential buyers getting to engage in a test drive. Similarly, whether it is a funny video or an online quiz or a discount coupon or a useful information site, the easier it is for someone to access it and try it out, the more likely it is that the adoption will diffuse well. Group norms refer to the extent to which a person looks around and sees that his or her other social network members have already adopted the message. For example, some new fashion trends are viewed as too risky, too young, or too radical to adopt, unless and until some proportion of the population is already wearing that fashion, which validates the appropriateness of adopting that innovation for any given innovation. Homophily represents one of the most resilient principles of social behavior. It refers to the actual or perceived similarity between people. Birds of a feather tend to flock together. People of similar demographic characteristics, geographic similarity or proximity, similar attractiveness, similar personality, and similar time zones and languages are much more likely to communicate with one another than people who are dissimilar. For example, 50% of Twitter followers tweet during the same time zone as the person being followed, and 75% of Twitter ties use the same language. This homophily extends to a special resilient form of homophily, which is reciprocity. The reciprocity principle means that we tend to do unto others as they do unto us. So, for example, in Twitter, attention to messages reinforces message production, and message production reinforces message attention. The correlation between the number of tweets produced and the number of followers is 0.70, and 0.77 between the number of mentioned users and the average number of tweets. The next factor that facilitates message diffusion is the communicability of the innovation. Communicability refers to how easy it is to diffuse the message in a manner that others can adopt. It used to be that there were only certain media for diffusing messages: word of mouth, newspapers, magazines, radio, billboards and signs, and television. Some of these media were specific to print media, and others were more compatible with image-based ideas. The Internet, the World Wide Web, smartphones, and social media have revolutionized the ease with which complex ideas can be communicated. Very few ideas now get diffused widely that do not rely in some significant degree upon smartphones, which have made multi-format messages much easier to communicate. Finally, the relative advantage of an innovation is the degree to which it presents some value to a potential adopter that is beyond what that person already has. So a political advertisement that contradicts a potential adopter's views may be disregarded because it offers no perceived advantage or value. In contrast, a candidate's appeal that appears to suggest a political agenda that might solve problems that the political opponent would not might be viewed as an important message to pay attention to. This concept of paying attention represents one of the most important facets of big data. There are many ways in which attention can be understood. In any given person's life, there are only so many hours the person is awake and capable of processing information. Further, people are limited information processors. They can only actually process so much information at a time. So businesses, organizations, governments, celebrities, politicians, friends and family are all competing for an increasingly crowded attention space. There is some elasticity in this space. For example, people walking around listening to music through their headphones are processing more music than before because technology has enabled more full-time, real-time communication of such information. Given increasing demands on our time, however, attention is becoming one of the new scarce resources for which many interested parties are competing. There are many forms of attention. There is attention competition for topics or issues, attention for certain people, attention for certain functions or activities, and attention to certain media. To summarize, between work-related communication, communication in our relationships, communicating in everyday service-based encounters, such as getting coffee and ordering a snack. There are dozens to thousands of others who would like to be noticed in some way or another. People vote with their attention, and their attention is what enables or determines the political process, the product economy, the service economy, and the success of one's relationships with others. Big data are the products and the side effects of such attention processes and provide maps to understanding the dynamics of such processes. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Now, let's go to Module 2 of this program.